Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality, and we're so glad you're here. This is a viewer and listener-supported podcast, so we greatly appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, share, and subscribe to any of the social media content platforms that you're using. And then if you go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, you can make a one-time donation, or with a monthly subscription, you'll gain access to our bonus content. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. We are excited to have Dan Cooper with us today. Dan is president of Acumen, and we're going to talk about that toward the end of our conversation, actually. But Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here with you, Fred.
Excellent. So I think we probably just met a couple of years ago, maybe, through a couple of common friends.
Correct.
Yeah, Augie Grasses and Drew Hiss. Yes. So
the world is small.
I know. I met Drew, who is, I guess, CEO of Acumen. I met him, I think, the first time on a trip to Haiti in 2011.
Oh, wow.
And we did a cycling, we did it with Global Orphan Project. And we took, I don't know, a few hundred Cannondale bicycles down there, built them, took them to orphanages. It was all after the earthquake, or I think somewhere around there. What year was the earthquake?
10.
Yeah, 10. So yeah, it was still in the aftermath of all of that. And so, yeah, we cycled all around Haiti together. So that was kind of crazy. But thanks for joining us. And let's jump into your story. Let's kind of introduce you to our listening audience.
Sure.
And why don't you tell us where you grew up and kind of give us some family background?
Sure. I'm a St. Louis kid, Lafayette High School. Thanks for asking, Fred.
Lafayette.
I stayed out of the Catholic mafia. So I was the public school kid from St. Louis versus the private school kid. I met my wife in Columbia at school. We got married.
MU?
At MU.
Yeah.
And ended up moving back to St. Louis and got married fairly early. Lived there for 8 years and then had an opportunity to move to Kansas City. She is a Brooksider and from Kansas City.
Oh, wow.
And so I wanted to live in the suburbs, which is where I grew up. She wanted to live in Brookside. And so we chose somewhere in the middle. So we've been here now 13 years and love KC. And now a Chiefs fan. Once you lose two football teams, they don't give you a third.
True.
And this town has soccer, but no hockey. So that's my only beef.
Oh, yeah.
So we have 3 kids.
But you're probably still a Cardinals fan, though, right?
Most definitely. Yeah, that one's tough too.
I was at a Cardinals game just a few weeks ago when they were in town.
Yes.
And they crushed us. It was so disappointing. At any rate, but oh well.
It's a good time. Yeah, that's the one thing you don't leave, for sure. So 3 kids, Owen, Josie, and Ben. Owen is 15. We're trying to find a car in the most expensive time of ever buying a car. Josie, who's 13, is all about talking about high school. And Ben, who's in 4th grade and 11 years old, it's all about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is very, very important.
Oh, I need to interview him.
He's hours and hours of facts.
We could do that.
And curiosities.
This would be awesome. I want to get a Marvel or a DC comic or both fan on here sometime and just talk superhero stuff.
That would be fantastic.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. So where did your wife go to high school? If she's a Brooksider?
St. Teresa's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Up here in the Northland.
No.
There's a St. Teresa's in Northland.
So
Kansas
this one
City.
is more Midtown.
Okay, Midtown, yeah. St. Teresa's. Mm-hmm. All right.
All girls Catholic school, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So your kids are going where?
Cure of ours and Rockhurst.
Oh.
So my freshman's at the Rock, and then we're at the local parish school.
There you go.
A couple of blocks from us.
All right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So if you haven't figured out, I'm Roman Catholic. Bum, bum, bum. And yes, we know and like Jesus.
Hey.
Not everybody knows that.
Oh, come on.
I've had some crazy conversations lately.
My favorite author the last 2 years of my spiritual journey, and I think I shared this with you privately, but is a Franciscan monk or a father. Oh God, I'm going to blank on his name now. All of a sudden,
Rohr?
Yeah, Richard Rohr. Thank
Rohr.
you. Yeah. So he has, and I love the Franciscan tradition. Saint Francis I had read a biography or two on him, but Richard has really, really been a blessing to me. His writings, books. I'm hoping to meet him, but I know he's battling cancer right now.
Is there one idea that like lit the fire of whatever that is in his writing? Was there something
so interesting? A friend of mine, Stan Kronigsfeld, when I was at probably my lowest point in 2019, literally mailed me a Richard Rohr book. And the title of it was Falling Upward. And I read it, and it was at a moment when I wasn't an atheist, but I was feeling like that. I was just in a super dark place. And I'd read spiritually my whole life, right? But I hadn't been. And I read this book, and it just it sort of rekindled my faith. And I'll be forever grateful to him for sending me a Richard Rohr book, And since then I've read a whole bunch of stuff. And my favorite book of his is called The Divine Dance. And it's easily the best book I've ever read on the Trinity. So
that's a bold statement.
Put it on your read list.
That's a bold statement.
Any rate, so you're Kansas City folks, but from St. Louis. Tell us a little bit about your business journey, and what after MU, like what'd you study at MU? What did you get into after college?
Yeah, so in school, I was a communications major, TV and radio, because I wasn't smart enough to be a broadcast journalist. I also looked like this, and I knew that wasn't going to go far in the journalism world. And so when I got out, it was the first time you could edit computer on a video, or edit video on a computer. And so started a video production company. My dad was a solopreneur, always worked in the basement, always just created businesses. And so I thought how you had to go out into the world was create a company and go start a thing. And so for the first 2 years, was doing CDs and DVDs and all the things that you did in video. And they wouldn't give you $100,000 as a young person, but they'd give you 10. And so this was a growing company until September 11th, 2001. When literally all my business went away in 24 hours. Not unlike what happened with COVID, the impact of that in large companies, everybody was shut down because they had no idea where it was going to go. So I had entire contracts. And what are you going to do as a solopreneur, or someone has a small team? You're not going to sue a giant company. So I had to start back over. So it took me about a week to figure out that company was done. And you do what all good entrepreneurs do. I went and sold stuff. So I sold technology and medical software and some video production systems. And it was good to get out in the real world to figure some stuff out, but I still wanted to go build something. And at the same time, my dad's business and a friend of his business were tanking as well. They were stand-up trainers. If you've ever been to 3 days of leadership training or 5 days of anything, back when they put 50 people in a room, that's what they did. And their market was crumbling. And so this little thing, the internet was growing up. YouTube had just launched. And the idea was, hey, we could take my video production background and your stand-up training background and create Netflix for the enterprise. We didn't know it at the time that that's what we were building, but we created off-the-shelf content that we then sold back to large enterprise, leadership, supervision, safety, sales, compliance, and all the like. And so it was content as a service before we realized what as a service was. And so we scaled that, had about 35 employees. The whole goal was to innovate instead of hire more people with technology. And as it went from screen to screen, we were on giant televisions, and we slowly got down to this small little device that grew up at the same time. So fascinating journey there. The joke in business circles is, what ship always sinks? A partnership. And so if you talk to any business person, almost every single one of them has a partnership story, and they have battle scars, or, things that are, some are healed and some are not. And so they were the older gentleman. I was the younger gentleman. They had already gambled. I was ready to go invest. And those two strategies do not mix. At the same time, my dad and this other partner, as the triad, just pride, ego, and lawyers. And it got real complicated. And so something had to change. You can either kill the golden goose, or you can decide to separate through a much, much, much longer conversation. My dad and I sold, and it was time to go do the next. So I learned a ton in that particular story. One is, you don't screw up your dad's exit, even though you think it's your company. And you go, and I had some decisions to make at some time. Is like, do I throw a grenade in here? And so blood is thicker than water, but until you actually have to look at the water and look at the blood and actually make that decision.
Yeah.
Two is that pride kills all things all the time. And so actually, having been in the middle of it and watching it, that has changed how I go about doing almost everything that I do today, seeing what it can do, and just how petty it can become.
Wow. It's like a divorce.
Oh, it is exactly. You have kids, they choose sides.
Yeah.
They don't know who's going to win. And here's the funny thing is, because this is hilarious, I was CEO one day.
And I bet you spend more money on lawyers than even divorces.
I mean, all those things, all the things you think are true are actually true. To go along with the emotional headache and the just all the junk that comes with that. So I was a CEO one day, and the next day I wasn't. And what nobody tells you is that you aren't what you do, and you say that, and then it becomes a reality. So imagine one day your email is full, you have people you can call, people take your call, and literally the next day they don't. It was the most humbling thing. You're like, I was a giant of industry. We were doing this thing, and now I'm just a dude like everybody else. And so I had worked so hard on that business that I had no network here in town because I'd moved. And so I learned basically how not to do the large part of the business part.
Interesting. Yeah, man. What year was that when it broke apart? 2012. Mm-hmm. So you had a thriving business, 9/11 hit, and you literally lost it overnight, basically. Is that right?
Correct.
So our interview, this will release a little bit later, but our interview is on September 14th. And so just 4 days ago, we were thinking backwards on 20 years of September 11th. And I wrote a little thing as well, because I had planted this church, and we had been meeting in a middle school for a decade, basically. Bought land, built a building. We're having our grand opening service the Sunday after 9/11 was our grand opening. So we sent mailers out, flyers to the whole community, and invited them to our grand opening service. And they're getting in the mailbox their mailer for our grand opening, basically on the Tuesday of 9/11, Wednesday of that week. And so we'd grown, in 11 years, we'd grown to about 400 people. And then the Sunday after 9/11, we had 800 people. So we added another 400 in 1 week.
Do you remember what your message was that day?
I was doing a whole series on grace that was based basically on, I was gleaning from a book called What's So Amazing About Grace by Philip Yancey. And so when 9/11 happened and all the thoughts were coming out, I stuck with a message on grace and continued that series, but applied it to applying grace to all kinds of situations, including even loving our enemies, which was kind of an interesting dynamic to bring into the table at that point, right?
A little bit.
Everybody was, a lot of ideas were coming around. We were being judged because of homosexuals. We were lots of hatred about terrorists and Muslims and all, there's just a lot of ugly stuff going around in a very short period of time. So I stuck with a message of grace and how to respond with grace in the midst of trials and tribulations and suffering and heartache and terrorism.
What I love about that message is ain't nothing changed, man.
Right.
That message
20 years later,
good today as it was back
20
then.
years later is like
same thing.
Need it even more, maybe,
Same thing.
Isn't that crazy?
Mm-hmm.
But we doubled and our money went backwards. So now we had twice as many people and less money because of the money, money really hit charities really hard in that 9/11 thing. So at any rate, but we got through it. So 2012, this whole company breaks apart. What?
So the company went on.
Oh, okay. So it sold.
So that's the funny thing is,
the partnership broke up, but the company sold and went forward.
That's correct.
Okay.
Graveyards are filled with indispensable men. So everyone thinks they're indispensable and they're amazing, including me. And you're thinking, gosh, I hope they work out, but it's not going to go as well without me. And if you do it right and you're a good leader, it's going to go just fine. And so we had good leadership principles, even though it was a train wreck at the end. That thing thrived. So
wow,
it's a fun.
What's the name?
Yeah, EJ4. It's EJ4.com. They just got purchased by a private equity not too long ago. My high school buddy ran it. He was my COO. Ended up becoming CEO.
Okay.
It was good.
Okay.
It was good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're in Kansas City. Don't have connections. You've just moved here 2012, and you're like, all right, where do I go from here? What's next in your life?
So the first thing you do is you take some time off. And so there was about 30 days to figure out, just decompress and to figure out what just happened. You move all your stuff out of your office and you come home and you high five your wife, and then reality sets in if I'm not doing anything on Monday anymore. And so I started to do lunch coffee. Just who are you and why are you here, and tell me more about this city, and here's my background. I'm not specifically looking for anything. And once you're an opportunity, once people understand who you are and where your opportunity lies, you get things thrown at you. So I started coming alongside other entrepreneurs to either grow through the cap ceiling, they could only grow so big, or they were sick and they needed to figure out how to right the ship and either sell or move forward. And so for the next 4 years, I was consulting, and it was fun. And you'd go in and solve problems. And sometimes I'm thinking, well, maybe I could buy this company from this person. Other times it's, hey, perhaps there's a partnership here. Even though in the back of my head, I said I would never have a partner again. And about 4 years in, I'm like, wow, is this just what I've become? I'm the hammer. I come in and I, fix things, or I fix something for an entrepreneur, help them grow, and they don't want to sell anymore. Imagine that. It's re-energized. It's moving. And so I got to a real big point of discontent, and I wanted to build something again. I think within all of us is, let's go build something bigger than ourselves, and being just a solopreneur. It's fun, but there is no team. And my kids don't want to listen to what happened today and how awesome it was.
Wow. So was this a consulting company that you started basically
Yeah, it was a one-man consultant shop.
Okay.
And, come in as a CXO or a COO, either within the team or alongside the team, and help them implement frameworks or organizational effectiveness techniques to grow profitability.
Was there a sweet spot? Were you just working off networking relationships, or were you actually targeting a certain type of business that was a certain size with a certain
spaghetti against the wall?
Okay.
It was more just as you had lunch, coffee, there was opportunities. But it turned out there was a sweet spot, and it was mid-market companies, call it in that 5 to 20 million, where they have enough resources to do something, but not enough resources to hire everyone they need or have all the techniques or things to implement. So to have somebody bring other ideas to the table was good.
Yeah. So you're talking, just for the audience, it's, not ever run a business, but you're talking about businesses, probably privately owned businesses, that are doing 5 million to 20 million in annual sales or annual revenue, however you'd want to term that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And that's the sweet spot there, is that they're not completely strapped like they were maybe when they were just launching and getting started. But yeah, they still need to be super strategic in how they allot their resources in order to continue to move forward and grow and make impact.
And there's natural plateau points where you get stuck in the whirlwind. To get to $1 million is one, and then you get to that 3 to 5, and that's 2. And so at each one, you have to reinvent the business and how it's organized, and that therein lies the challenge.
Right.
Something entrepreneurial usually is built on the power of this person, and now you have to take that power and give it to other people, and hijinks ensue.
Yeah. It's so fascinating because I've done, I started a church with 5 people, and it grew to several thousand. My first budget was like 30,000 a year. And I think when I resigned, we were hitting close to 6 million. This is a church, which is significant for a church. And there's those plateaus in church life, and we don't look at it so much from the financial side, but from the people side. So in a volunteer intensive organization like the church, your workforce is, you have way more people in your workforce that are volunteers than are actually getting a paycheck. Right. So the complexity of the organization is based on like volunteers, numbers of volunteers.
And all problems are people problems. If it weren't for us people, we'd get a lot of stuff done.
Yeah. So like growth barriers in church are like 50 people, 100, 200, 400, 800, and then you get into barriers that are bigger than that, but they're all the same. Like what you just described, that you have to almost reinvent yourself. You have to operate a different way organizationally in order to keep growing. It's very true in the church world as well. So yeah, interesting. So we had when I resigned, we had over 2,000 volunteers. So if you think about the complexity of the organizational workforce, around 2,000 people.
So can I just push on that point you just made about the church? There's the same stair steps and plateaus.
Yeah.
The divide between nonprofit and for-profit is silly. There is a challenge that I would throw out is it's all for-profit, but it's in nonprofit, it's not for loss. It's all the same challenges, and churches are operational entities, just like companies are, and we all could lean in a little closer to each other and I think solve a lot of problems. There's this weird wall. I don't know how to break it down yet. I think it's something that's going to happen soon because it has to, because nonprofits have to create revenue in this new age in some capacity, because the donor base is going to dwindle over the next decade as this silver tsunami comes. So I think there's some innovating to be done on both sides.
Yeah, and I think I know, like Harvard Business School at one point, a decade or more ago, started trying to focus on nonprofit volunteer intensive organizations, because like if you think about it, like if I had a volunteer, they were not only given their time, but usually their money, and they weren't getting a paycheck. And so what was the buy-in? And so the missional component, the inspirational component to that nonprofit world was huge. And like businesses, mostly operated out of profit and paychecks. Well, paychecks are kind of short-term motivators, right?
So where are we headed on the organizational side? We now, Simon Sinek's Start With Why is the beginning of that trajectory.
Yeah.
There's a great book called Everybody Matters, which is all about everyone in your workplace is someone else's son or daughter. Wouldn't you want them to be treated with the same thing as your son and daughter? So you can feel that messaging come over to this side, and people are trying to figure out, what does that actually mean, and how does that impact the bottom line?
Yeah. So I love this intersection here of, the nonprofit missional focus and people are like literally giving their time and energy and money because of the mission, and versus like, how do you create that kind of sense of purpose and culture in a profit company and have a culture like you've just described that's actually has some valued center culture to it, not only for your employees, but your customer base as well, your client base as well. Yeah, good stuff. So we jumped ahead there. Sorry. No, that's good. Let me ask you about your spiritual journey. How have you had a time in your life where have you been on a roller coaster spiritually? Have you had do you have high points, low points? Was there a time in your life when it like dramatically shifted your spiritual journey? How would you map your spiritual journey throughout your life, and what does that look like? So highs, lows, whatever.
Yeah. Oh, try to do the short version. As I grew up, Mom was Catholic, Dad was Baptist, and so therefore we were Methodist, because that's what that means. And we went to a lot of churches. My dad always got involved in boards, and so we moved around a lot. And I was never confirmed. I didn't go through any of the classic stuff because we were hoppers. So I had a very eclectic view of church, not of Jesus. I think I always had a very centered. My mom was a prayer warrior. My dad always taught wherever we were. But in terms of how to worship and what it looked like and what it felt like, was always very open. Did a hedonism train in high school and college, got married. I always knew I'd come back to it. My wife's cradle Catholic. I'm whatever that is at this point.
Hedonism train.
Is there another kind?
I'm just curious. Have you ever heard of a hedonistic Christian?
Say more about that.
No, there's some theologians out there that really, like even C.S. Lewis talked about when we pursue the highest pleasure, which he would have been saying God, then we should all be Christian hedonists, because what we do is we settle for lower pleasures, and when we don't go for the ultimate, Anyway,
if I remember, he was talking about mud puddles.
There you go.
Versus,
you got it.
We are all hanging out in mud puddles.
You got it.
So I was making mud puddles during high school,
the hedonistic, the mud puddle train.
And so when we finally had first kid and said, hey, we should go to the same church. And she's cradle Catholic. I'm this weird thing. And we probably visited 18 churches over a 2-year period. Big churches, small churches, hat on backwards, big band, small band, hands up, hands down. I mean, the whole nine. And nothing like, I like something, she likes something, nothing on the same track. And the Catholic Church was never an option. I was like, listen, there's junk in my family about that. Like, my mom grew up through the 50s and 60s and ruler hitting and, giving people the finger causes you to get pregnant and things like that. I don't know if they actually said those things. That's just how my mom talks about it. Like, it was ridiculous. It was crazy. And this was in like 03 to 05, which is when the Catholic Church is at one of its low points of just all of the sexual, predatory, disgusting stuff is coming out. So I'm just like, hey, no entry, no bueno. Like we're not even doing it. So I'm driving by in our neighborhood in St. Louis, which has a Catholic church on every corner. And it's the first time God's ever, like, quote unquote, spoke to me, driving by it, and it was like, you should go here. Like, pardon me, do you know what's going on there right now? And do you know the junk how that would go? And that has a tall wall to get into because it takes a year. And so I'm going through all this thing, and there was silence afterwards, kind of like, dude, you asked, I told you, you're free to choose. So I go home that night and I'm like, think we should try the Catholic Church. Of course, my wife is like, who made you say that? And if you're honest, I didn't do it. I didn't make you. Like, you can't ever hold this against me, right? Like, if this is the one that I would like, you can't do it. And I'm like, no, this is of my own volition. It just took me a while to get here. And I used to think that the Catholic Church needed a evangelical, evangelistic person to help it grow. And what I found out was I needed it and its depth. I'm a shiny object, input, learner kind of guy. There is so much content I could live many, many lifetimes and never get all the things from it. So it has been an amazing blessing to me. And
that's cool.
It's not the normal way you convert.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that amazes me about the Catholic Church is, it's a long history, good, bad, and indifferent, right? But then the streams that are in the Catholic Church, there's so many different streams, like we were talking, like Francis, I keep saying Francis because he's a Franciscan, but Richard Rohr's stream is the Franciscan stream. And it's very distinct from, say, like the Thomist stream in Catholicism, around Aquinas and all that stuff. And so, you got scholasticism, you got mysticism, you got all of these different streams, and some of them are quite different from each other. But you're right. There's so many different places to swim in that historical thing we call the Catholic Church. That
So this is a question that I think I've asked a bunch of times as strange things keep happening in our organization. And I think other Christians are starting to ask themselves, or at least I've heard, which is it time to go somewhere else, or do something else, or be something else, or stop? And I just coming back to Peter's line, like, where are we going to go? Like, you're gonna leave this? Like, everything's broken somewhere, right? So you can either be a part of it and make it so, or you can leave it. And so that one has been tough, because there's been many tough things to stare at. And you're like, wow, maybe I'm not supposed to be here, but I don't know where I'd go. So I think Christians, for the first time, being a Christ follower is going to cost us something. Where our country is headed, it's going to get interesting. Maybe not in the next 10 years, but our faith will be tested as it's going to cost us something in this next generation.
Yeah. So would you say that you're like, once you got connected to the church, there was that actually was a significant point in which your spiritual growth was accelerated? Would you say that? Yeah, I'd say it was the beginning, and then the company tragedy, or whatever you want to break up, was the other one. As my faith was growing, you're in prayer, and the message that my journal would say I was getting is, it's not my company. And I'm like, right, Lord, it's all yours, right? Mm-hmm. Stewardship, everything belongs to you. Mm-hmm. And this one was actually literal. Like, no, seriously, dude, it's not your company. And it's not often that it's a literal translation. And so afterwards, it's like, well, if that wasn't my company, then what am I supposed to do? And so during that consulting time was this intense, why am I here? What am I for?
who should I do it for? Who should I do it with? And this discernment of like, okay, if it's yours and you're going to guide me in this, like, I'll go. I didn't know it'd be that long of a walk to figure out what my next one was. But it was definitely a time of deep reflection to help me figure out what my why was.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's jump into Acumen and how you got connected with Acumen, and give us a little history of Acumen and what that company's all about. You're the president of Acumen.
Yeah.
So
we all have whatever title we want to give ourselves nowadays. So in that journey, I figured out my why was to come alongside other people to help them grow their thing. And thing is a very important word in that one phrase, because it means lots of things, whether it means father or kid or business or so I'm a developer of people, and that is why I was made. And so I ended up, after this kind of 4-year stint and wanting to get back into building something, lunch, coffee, end up meeting my now business partner, which I said I would never have. And I start describing what I love and hate about the current thing that I do and what I really want to do. And here's kind of my one phrase strategy. And he said, that's funny. Let me tell you about what I'm doing. And he explains Acumen, which is a catalytic community of owners and CEOs of mid-market companies that come together to increase impact and influence within their community. And so it is a peer advisory and mastermind community that helps companies in that $5 to $50 million space increase their top line, optimize their bottom line, and enrich the storyline. And it is playing glass before stained glass. So it is people, performance, profit, and yet how we make decisions matter. So faith is a part of it. You have to raise your hand and say, hey, Jesus is somewhere on the spectrum in my life while I'm going to build whatever you've been called to build.
Say that again. You had 3 rhymes there. Not the whole thing again, but just
Please don't say all this stuff.
Yeah, not all of it. Just
grow your top line. Is that what you're talking about?
The 3 rhymes that you had right in a row. Anyway, how did you say that? I lost it.
Which piece? It was very memorable because you can't remember it.
Yeah, it was right before you talked about the plain glass versus the stained glass. You said you wanted.
So it's probably grow the top line. Right. It's all about profitability. Mm-hmm. You need to
grow the top line,
optimize the bottom line. So reduce costs, which gives you more dollars, and then enrich the storyline.
Enrich the storyline.
Growth for the sake.
For
the sake of growth is silly.
I like the enrich the storyline. I mean, obviously the top line is critical. Mm-hmm. You know, you want a growth oriented company, I'm assuming, right? Yeah. And then, of course, the bottom line is where money's being wasted, and
it's profitability. Right?
Yeah.
If you optimize the bottom line, then
right.
something good's happening, and it allows you to do stuff with the resources you create.
Mm-hmm. But talk a little bit about optimizing the storyline.
So if you enrich someone's storyline, a couple of models. If you look at Abraham, and let's take the centurion, I think it is. So,
like Bible Abraham?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you take Bible Abraham and God's like, hey, you're going to be my God and you're going to be my people. He's like, great, let's all go get circumcised. So you get the guy at the top and the rest of the organization comes alongside.
Circumcised.
Yeah, right. So if that's a value, you had to say why, right? So that's a very extreme example. Let's go back now to the New Testament and kind of bring it forward. As Peter goes to the centurion's house and he's like, hey, if you'll all be baptized, then you and your house will then come. So enriching the storyline is if you get the leader at the top, manager, the topmost person, and they have a change in values and heart and head and mind, and they now have a deeper purpose other than just profitability. I mean, it has to be there or else who cares? But then the storylines start to change, both inside their company, which is the people they've been given to shepherd, and outside in the community. And so that is the storyline, and inside themselves and their marriages and their kids so it's that ripple effect. So
yeah,
that's the enrichment.
Awesome. I like that. Yeah. Ownership and who's the real manager around here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Submission to, or surrender to, we like to say in the recovery world, it starts with surrender. The journey of recovery starts with surrender.
Probably every journey
I
starts
think
with
maybe
surrender.
There's something there, isn't there? Yeah. You're not the center of the universe. Somebody else is,
I mean, that's my story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, when was Acumen founded?
Oh, you're going to test me. When would that be then? What is it? 2015. 2015.
And
it started with Drew, who started a team of 12 owners and CEOs. I came alongside, and the hypothesis was, what if we went deep in a market? So a lot of times what happens is one person builds a team, and that's kind of, it's nice and it's cool. And if they grow, they put somebody in another city and they build a team, they give them the tools, and then they go across each city. And our hypothesis was, what happens if we just went real deep in one city and grew it to as big as we could? So today we're 85 owners and CEOs and key executives, with 5 people that are growth catalysts, which are the facilitator of each team. And we just opened up Denver. So we went really deep. And what we found is at about 50, funny stuff starts to happen. There's enough people that and resources that generosity things and business deals and connection starts to work without us doing any heavy lifting. Just the momentum of the community does a lot.
Yeah, the relationships kick in.
And
right?
So, wow, how many communities could use that?
Yeah, so you're talking like in Kansas City right now, you have 85 CEOs that are running privately owned mid-range companies between 5 million and 50 million annual sales revenue.
Correct.
All right. All 85 of these people, are they men and women?
They are. I would tell you that from a demographics, there's just more men that run companies.
Believe me, I know.
There are women. So it is.
I like to hunt for women CEOs.
Disproportionate,
right?
And something worth working on and looking at.
Sure.
Looking after.
Yeah, and I mean diversity, not just male female, but same way with trying to find minority business owners and that kind of thing.
So we started one team in Denver. It's more diverse than almost all of Kansas. Why is that? Denver's more diverse than Kansas. Mm-hmm. And there's a challenge there. Some of it's just, we don't know how to cross the divide. And so that is something that we're looking on. There's been Unite KC here, and that's launched. And so we're a part of some things to try to figure out how we cross that bridge. And then on the other end, there's just a reality of it's what the makeup of the city looks like.
Yeah.
So can we all do better? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But there's also reality.
Yeah. I attend the largest African-American church in Kansas City, Missouri. And so, but yeah, I keep my eyes out for women CEOs and African-American CEOs, Hispanic CEOs. So yeah. Well, cool. So you've got 85, most of these would say they're followers of Jesus, right? And they want to build a company that has spiritual values that run through it. Is that correct? Or
so look at it as a spectrum. There are CEOs that happen to be Christians, and then Christians that are CEOs. So if you ask me if I was Buddhist or Jewish or Muslim, I want to be like, no, I'm Christian. And then you'd ask me about what's my journey look like. And you're like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of a cultural Christian, and we go a couple of times a year. On the other side of that is someone who can quote scripture, leads Bible study, probably has a morning practice, and they just happen to run a company. And so we target this 1 to 5, and the 6 to 10 just come along. And together in a room, there's this genuine discipleship that pulls them forward. And what's funny is there's a lot of truth and a little bit of grace when it comes to business on one side. And there's a lot of grace, but a little bit of truth on the other. And they both pull each other towards increasing in grace and increasing in truth, which is really what our faith is about.
Good. So when you get 12 business owners in a circle together and they're meeting on a regular basis, you get all this peer dynamic. They learn from each other. They're in a similar bandwidth in terms of their annual revenue and sales, and so they're probably facing some of the same problems, same obstacles, same struggles, as well as some of the same opportunities. Right? True.
For sure.
It's true. All right. Regardless of what their business is, right?
So 97% of all challenges are people challenges. Right seat on the bus. How do you handle this or not handle this? And then I would say there's a lot of strategy involved, and there's a lot of checking. When they say it's lonely at the top, what are they talking about? There are times when almost all CEOs have said something out loud, and to have people in their office after that saying, so does that mean I'm out of a job, or are we selling the company? And it was really just I'm trying this on to see how it feels. And so it's also a safe, transparent place to try on and see. So not only is it best practice sharing, it's a safe place to grow without any repercussions, just in case.
Yeah. And so you've got the peer mentoring, you've got the spiritual component. There's spiritual growth. It's a dynamic that's going on because the people are meeting in community and sharing their lives and sharing their faith and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm assuming there's a business mentoring component. And so you guys probably work with some type of a paradigm where you're checking down through the major systems that every business needs to operate well. And
sure, there's best practices across it. I'd say the other pieces to the puzzle. So there's one-on-one executive coaching. It's where you get a little deeper, a little more into the weeds, both of the entrepreneur's mindset, but also of their business, financially, structurally, and then we have an all-community event where the entire community gets together. It's the accidental networking no one actually wants to do to begin with, in a place where it's okay to shake hands. And then we try to get out of town once a year, go do something adventure-y. Not unlike whatever you're thinking of the adventure is, that's the type of adventure you try to go on. When everyone's not trying to make the next meeting, there's just more relationships built.
Good stuff. So you're working, you do executive coaching. In that executive coaching, I'm sure you're breaking down the business organizational model into some key components. Is that true or not?
So every business is different, and there's a method to the madness, but some of it's based upon what are the challenges of the entrepreneur or the business owner then. Some of it is simple as, should I go left or should I go right? Other is, hey, do you know any people that could help me with XYZ? And so we are general practitioners. If we were doctors, we are general practitioners. We're going to make sure you're healthy. And then if you have a specific piece that is sick, we're going to help you find a specialist.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So there's a bit of a pathology report and a bit of a health report, right? So you're like, where's the company sick? What are the most common factors of a privately owned company that's growing, but has what are the most common elements that are like going, these are some of the basic big problem.
Without a vision, the people perish.
Okay.
We don't know where we're going, why we're going there, or what winning looks like. Just more, faster, or hold on for dear life and let's make it to the next quarter and let's do it over and over again. So if you don't have, so vision, mission, values, everybody talks about them. You don't have to call them those, but you need to have an idea of where you're going. So that'd be one. Two is lack of visibility in finance. I don't understand cash flow. Yes, my bank account says it has money in it, but I don't understand how things come in or things go out. And so that would be two. And then three is, am I playing by some sort of playbook? If you watch any football game, there's plays, there's entire books of how we're going to execute both offense and defense and strategy. It's usually 3 to 5 years for that to evolve. And there is organizational whiplash within leaders, which is, well, we're going that way, doing it this way. We're going that way, doing it this way. So do you have a playbook that you've decided on that is not a shiny object that you are going to, for the next 3 to 5 years, use?
Stick with it.
That doesn't mean you're not going to innovate or change, but it's how will everyone know how the game is played? So there is a semblance, because the world is on fire, how fast it's moving now. So our strategies need to be simple and yet something you can do over and over.
Things that you can measure, nickels and noses, we used to say in the church, but I mean, your client base, your sales, all of that stuff. But then you have these intangible things that are so important that are much harder. They're like the social factors in a business that can be extremely important, but it's hard to put a metric around it, right?
What's an example of one?
Well,
church?
So for the church, if you say, okay, well, we want to help people become devoted followers of Jesus. Okay, well, cool. Well, how do you measure that? That's like a spiritual, it's a spiritual / social metric that, then how would you, how do you know if somebody actually grew last year to this year, where they're actually a deeper follower of Jesus? How would you even measure that? That kind of a thing. Right? So it's not just like, hey, we got 10 more people, but what's going on in the hearts of these 10 people?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
So I think you're talking about two different things. One is the scorecard metrics. I would call it a scorecard is, how do you know you're winning? You need something that measures wins and losses, and you have to put something on the board. And then there's other metrics, organizational health, the intangible stuff, right? How are we living out our vision, mission, values? How does that look? Are people moving forward in it? Well, what I have found is that every company is different, and you just have to start, and then those things become apparent over time. And usually your team is ending up giving it to you versus you deciding what it is and pushing it down. It's a very bottom up. The intangibles are bottom up because you can't see what's going on down there.
Yeah. Yeah. Social factors are definitely there, but you do have health signs, even like your turnover rate on your employees and stuff like that maybe tells you something. If you're having a higher turnover rate in terms of employees, certain types of employees, certain sectors of employees than other companies.
Sure.
So what's going on there? That gets back to diagnosing some of your issues you're dealing with.
Yeah, the best way to figure out what's wrong in your company is just ask the people in your company. They are more than happy to tell you what is not going well. Now, ask them what's going right and what's awesome, and it's very hard to answer, but there's usually no lack of feedback from how could we do things better.
There you go. Yeah. All right. Well, tell people how they can connect with Acumen, and what's your websites? What are ways that just anybody, like if somebody's out there listening, they're going, hey, I wish my CEO would get involved in that, or if they're just a worker, an employee, and they just like what they're hearing. Is there a way that just somebody who's not a CEO can connect with Acumen?
Sure. Number one, just hit the website, Acumen Impact, IMPACT.com, all one word. And then on that homepage is the most valuable tool for dealing with high stakes conversations called Fetch. It is an 8-step process that I guarantee if you follow it, it will make hard conversations easier. And so that's right on the homepage. You can download that. That is a go-to tool that everybody in the world should know how to use, whether it's with wives and kids or if it's with employees and managers.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 big spots.
I came across, I've been exposed to that. It is good. Lots of practical uses for that.
Yeah.
Good. Excellent. All right. Well, tell us what you feel like is going on in Kansas City as we kind of close. What's going on in Kansas City as far as work environment, workplaces? Are people catching on to more faith-based friendly work things? Do you see a trend of any type that's positive and hopeful?
Yeah. I would say we're all biased. We all have our own little vein that we're seeing. And so I try to get out of the hot tub every once in a while. The hot tub's nice and it's warm and it's full of like nice friends. And so when I get out of the hot tub and look around Kansas City, I see 2 things. One, kind of a preparation for whatever is coming. We are a growing city. There is investment coming into our town. We're in the middle of the map. Manufacturing's coming back to the States because everyone's supply chains have been all jacked up. So there is much opportunity that is going to come to our city. And so a war on talent and a just competition is coming. And so it is a preparation and get your house in order so you're ready for the opportunity and ready for the challenge. And then from the faith side, I do think that there is this unification going on. I'm a Catholic dude. My partner is a rock and roll church, non-denominational. We sit in groups where everybody is in all things. I think there is a unity within the business community that I hope is going to eventually there's this meeting of church and business that gets closer and closer. I think I have some mental junk around that in my head, but I think there is this coming together because it feels like it's outside. So this movement within the marketplace, but it's still only one company at a time, one leader at a time. So those are some big trends if I were to just throw a dime out there.
Excellent. Well, I was able to interview Mark Whitaker a few weeks ago, and he, with this T Factor, and that was so fascinating. I went to that T Factor conference. I think you guys
it was
part of hosting that or hosted it. Yeah. And I was so encouraged by that whole thing, especially with a company like that, this co-consolidated and publicly traded company being able to build faith-based friendly environments. I thought, wow, this is cool.
You bet.
Yeah.
So now it's time to show people. So we've done a lot of telling. Now it's time it's the show part.
Yeah.
For all that.
That's good. Well, thanks, Dan, for joining us. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures. Be sure and tune in to acumenimpact.com. Is that right?
That's correct.
And check out Fetch, because that's a great tool you can use in your home, with your family, with your kids, in your marriage, and in your workplace. So check that out and take care. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Brad.
This concludes today's episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember to like, share, or subscribe to the social media platform that you're using. And then go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, and make a one-time donation, or you can subscribe monthly and receive our special bonus content. Thanks so much.